you could be self-sustaining if you had to be. So you're not really relying on any one company or any one aspect of the industry and the supply chain to operate your company. If you're a standalone retailer, you need to buy product. So you're relying on the people who produce the product to get that product. You can't control the price of that product.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields. With me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Carl Giannone and Jesse Pitts, founders of Trade Routes. Gentlemen, thanks for taking time. How are you doing today?
Hey, guys.
Great. Thanks for having us.
It's good to see you. Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Really excited to talk to both of these two and kind of dive into the boutique operation they're running out in Massachusetts and some of the strengths that come from how they're operating their business model out there. How are you doing, Brian?
Yeah, I'm stoked. I think getting another perspective of one of my favorite East Coast operators, and one that I think gets a lot of love, and one that I think is going to be a little more popular as time continues to progress. So gentlemen, before we dive in, we got a little East Coast, West Coast battle. I know I already put that on the map, but I just had to hear it for the record. East or West, look, please.
So, I mean, I think that, you need both. There's tons of strains out there, and there's a lot of good strains out here. And that's something actually we want to talk about in this podcast, is how we're trying to integrate a lot of West Coast strains into our gardens because the customers demand it. And, once they go out to the West Coast and try those candy strains, they demand them out here. So it's an interesting transition that's happening right now. When we first started up, we wanted to be very local. So we brought in a lot of local strains, a lot of local breeders, and wanted to give love to them and call them out where they should be called out. And now we're at the point where, like, all right, let's integrate the garden and pull in a bunch of the West Coast strands and strains and get that going. So that's exciting for us.
I love it. So let's kind of take it backwards. How did you get into cannabis? And Carl, you want to start, and then we could dive into Jesse?
I actually think it probably makes more sense for the chronology of the story for Jesse to start.
My favorite question always is, what did you do before cannabis? And I'm like, I think it was seventh grade. It's always been there. I was selling cannabis as a youth because I enjoyed it and I couldn't afford it. So it was an easy way for me to get what I wanted. And then it spiraled once I got to college. I went to UMass Amherst, and I swore I was not going to do what I was doing in high school, and I was going to, study and get my degree. And college is expensive too. So I was like, this place is like shooting fish in a barrel. I have to do this. So I started doing it with a group in my dorm, and that quickly snowballed into something much larger. And we were bringing in a lot of product from Montreal up in Canada, back in the Beaster days, if you will, and spreading, that flower, if you can call it that, all over the East Coast. We were moving hundreds and hundreds of pounds a week while operating out of college. So it was an interesting thing that continued even after college. Even after I graduated, I still kept doing it because we developed the business. And, for me, it was, there were rules, there were codes, and that was what I wanted to do. And I knew that one day this would be, legal, and it was not really a natural law to me. It was more of a man-made law that I thought we would overcome, and eventually here we are today. But that path actually wound me up in jail because I got arrested for selling. I caught 70 pounds and about $250,000 in cash in Norton. So I did 18 months sentence in Plymouth County. I served 9 inside, 9 out on a bracelet. Went on to start a medical company with a group of friends from college. That company got kind of swallowed up, if you will, by a much larger company that went on to do their own thing. And I waited and waited because it was then the Department of Public Health put out an announcement that if you have a cannabis record, you cannot even be an employee for a medical company, let alone be an owner. So I had to walk away, even though we were still submitting an application. I had to walk away from the company and keep my eye on adult use because I knew it was around the corner, and I was just waiting to see the regulations change. And when they rolled out the social equity program, that really blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, I have, now I actually get a leg up instead of being excluded. And I was just like, they're actually going to let the professionals play. This is kind of interesting. So we decided that, we're going to start to work on building a business plan, putting the company together, And that kind of led me, we were doing a lot of test kitchen stuff outside, doing extractions. I took extraction courses with Havlick Associates, which created the Hal booth out in Colorado, and then came back to the East Coast. I ordered a closed loop hydrocarbon extractor on my way home, turned my construction trailer into an extraction lab, and was giving clones to all my friends to grow outdoor 12 plants. They would give me the harvest, I would extract it, split everything with them in the end. So we were doing toll processing back when no one even knew that it was something to do here on the East Coast. It was an interesting trial run and it worked. And that ended up meeting, that's how I ran into Carl. And it's kind of a little bit different story. And we ended up on a farm out in Oregon. And I was just looking at everything that they had built there. And I was just like, man. And I just looked at him, I was like, why don't we just move this farm to Wareham? And he's like, what the fuck is Wareham? So that's kind of how Trade Route started. Got back from there, and then off and running, started building the business plan. And I approached my hometown first because I had I was third year generation local there, and I had ties there. So I was just like, this is what we want to do. Here's the guidance. What do you guys think? And they were like, yeah, we're into this. So they were very helpful. The town of Wareham was absolutely fantastic throughout the process. We were kind of learning the process together. And now I think they're very savvy about it now. But yeah, my hat's off to them, to being open to it and knowing that this is coming and being accepting to it. Going through the whole process was difficult, but everybody wants to hear what this is going to look like and what it's going to be like. And, everybody wants to spit in the soup a little bit too. So, it gets a little difficult, when you have conservation and all that involved, but the town of Wareham was fantastic. And we got Trade Routes up and running in
We started, it was fall of 17, and we were up and running by 21.
So Carl, I got to ask, what were you doing prior to Cannabis, and how long had you known Jesse prior to making that decision to linking up with him and doing Trade Routes?
Sure. So, I fully admit it. Up until 2017, I thought this was a business for criminals and children, which given us, I guess that makes me whatever. So I was a buy-side trader in Manhattan, didn't sell anything. My job was to make a pile of money bigger and employ people to make piles of money bigger. And, the early Canadian RTO stuff in 13 was all, I'm not going to make any comments about the current pubcos, but just a lot of nonsense, right? And so I also thought that medical cannabis was, when I'm sick, and I always loved the plant. From the first time I tried it when I was 16, I guess. I loved it. But from a business standpoint, didn't really understand. And from a medical standpoint, I always thought, glaucoma, intraocular pressure, nausea, okay. But also when I'm sick, I'd rather be high and sick. And if I was really sick, I'd probably like to be really high. And that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, as a business, whatever. And so when we get back from Oregon, plane landed, and we found out that my mom, we thought, had a little tear in her shoulder. It's a big mass, metastasized everywhere. And I was privileged enough to be able to spend a lot of time with her in hospice and hospitals and all of that. And that's when I helped write the business plan and all of that. But talking to nurses, it's so funny. You talk to, and this is Fairfield County, Connecticut, right? So good hospitals. And, the doctor, young, the oncologist, late 30s, and smart. But asking him, so what do you think about this? Connecticut has a caregiver program. He's like, there's no medical value for this. And then all of the nurses behind him shaking their heads and would come out and talk to me. And so it was okay. And yeah, so while I never thought that, when Jesse was like, hey, how about you move to a town of 20,000 in Massachusetts when I was living on the Upper East Side of New York City, my high school guidance counselor didn't tell me this was an option, guys. And, I've been really fortunate that, and I worked with some great people in my past industry, but this industry, I say it all the time online and all of it, the best thing about this industry is the people. And I have met such creative, smart, resilient, kind, just people that'll extend their hand. Yes, there's the other side too, but we don't have to talk about that. But they're just some really great people. And so, yeah, I will constantly say I'm the luckiest guy in the room.
I love it.
Thank you again.
How long had you known each other when you decided to start the company?
In my mind, the company was always a thing, but step by step, when I was standing on that mountain talking to Carl, I realized like the way that we were interacting, I was like, why don't you just be my partner?
As I'm annoying him with a million questions, I was peppering him the entire time.
You know, I knew going into this was going to be a daunting task, and to do it alone was going to be difficult. And the aspect I did not bring to the table was really the finance background and, you know, raising capital. Everything I did was always underground. You know, you left your phone in the car when you ate lunch. You know, it was just a different world that I was entering into, and to have somebody that was from that world already that could kind of, you know, help me merge these two things together was paramount. And, you know, working with Carl and you know, when you spend 5 days that close to somebody, like camping on a mountain in Oregon, you get to know somebody really fast. And so for me, I was like, this is something we can do. So we just continued the conversation when he got home, and we just kept going forward. And it was always, all right, we just got to get to the next step and get to the next step. But the cannabis industry is difficult because, you know, you realize like the cart is always before the horse. So it's just like, oh, we got to get this, but in order to get this, we have to get that first. But yeah, in order to get that, then you have to get the thing in front. So it's just like, all right, well, we were sitting at lunch one day, and I was just like, I just started laughing, and I was like, we just need to teach the horse to push the fucking cart. And you know, we were like, like no matter what, we just got to keep moving forward. Like eventually, the horse will figure out how to push the cart, and then we'll be fine. It was just kind of like a metaphor. Like we just got to figure it out anyway, you know. And we always did every step of the way. And you know, I feel like a lot of people were surprised that we actually got, you know, to where, you know, what we call the starting line. Because it was funny. It was like, you did it. You got your license. You made it. You finished. And I was like, no. It's like, I know, like, I feel like I've been running a marathon forever, and you can see like the line, and like you're just running, and you're getting closer and closer. You finally get there, and it's a start. It's like, oh shit, you know it's gonna keep going. So it's definitely a hell of a journey and a ride. But this part of it's exciting for me because it is in the open, and we are, you know, integrating this into a legitimate business, and that's what really moves me, and to see the people that have taken that leap of faith to push it into the light, and to really be the voice of, you know, that legacy market. That to me is been fantastic. And there's not as many of them as you would think that there are. And I think that there's still a lot of people standing on the sideline kind of waiting to get involved. And, you know, I welcome that, because there's still a lot of talented people out there that are not participating in this, in the legal industry.
So you two meet in Oregon, you fall in love on this mountain, you come back to the East Coast to start a business. So you both land on the East Coast, right? Get the business plan together. This is 2017. Kind of talk us through those first 4 years of like regulatory stuff, picking the property, choosing the strains that you want to launch, the whole business plan. Like, what was the majority of that time spent on those first couple years while you get all these ducks in a row to get the thing actually functioning or to the start line, right?
Yeah, so the application process was interesting. A lot of it was check the box. So you just have to have certain things in place, SOPs, whatever it is. But for us to really try to put a good business together and a business plan together was finding the right tools to help us do that. And you know, I looked at this as an opportunity to learn. And, you know, who are the new professors now? It's the lawyers and the accountants. And, you know, so it's just like, all right, teach me, and I'll teach you my side of it. And let's work together to figure out how this all fits together. Our law firm, Foley Hoag out of Boston, Kevin Conroy, is, you know, by far probably the best lawyer in cannabis, and really took us under his wing for, you know, a fraction of what he probably should have charged us. Thank you, Kevin. You know, because he saw what we were trying to do, and knew that it was going to be a long haul. But he wanted to see, like, hey, let's see if they can get to the next step. And we kept doing it. So we started to build that momentum. I think at one point he referred to us as the little train the little engine that could. Yeah. So he's been a fantastic mentor. Mitzi from Citron Cooperman, fantastic mentor as well. And working through some of the regulations, both of them, was very interesting. And then, you know, all the construction phase of it all was fascinating. I have some construction background, but not building, you know, a full vertical cannabis facility.
So I will say, and I've never been involved in any construction project. we go into the conference room and it's Jesse and all these construction guys. So I always had a notebook, and even with the cannabis stuff, it's let me take a note, let me research, so we can catch up to speed. And so one of the guys says something about change orders, and they all laughed. And then I learned what change orders meant in construction.
Money. So yeah, that was the goal, was to find those people to help us through the regulations and guide us. The application was a check the box type of thing, but to actually get that license, you have to know what you're doing, and you have to be able to convince people. And then the hardest part is raising the funds. So that's why that's so important, having those pieces of the puzzle, because you're building a pro forma. You're not just getting a license. You're building a company while you're applying for a license. Like that's what they say about cannabis. It's like building the rocket while flying the rocket, while funding the rocket, fixing the rocket. And it's just, so it's, you have to be versatile, and you have to have very thick skin. I always joke to people that are like, oh, what do you think about me getting in the cannabis industry? And I was like, if you're going to do it, don't put your toe in. I was like, someone's going to bite it off. I was like, if you're going to do it, I said, just cannonball that bitch. Like, just go in like you own it, because otherwise they're going to eat you alive. It's pretty cutthroat at times when it comes to that corporate side of things, but that's just business, I guess, in nature. And I think that's where you have a lot of culture clash with, the mainstream, businesses and cannabis, where cannabis has a completely different type of culture to it than that side of it. But it's going to take a give take to get us to where we need to be.
So just real quickly, vertical integration, would love for you to expand on that and what that means for your business, and then take us through like how that works, right? Jesse, I understand you come with various skills in the cannabis industry, but you're a single person, and vertical integration means you're running maybe 6 businesses simultaneously. So dispersing those responsibility, hiring individuals, and then working through the teams to understand how to put the pieces of the puzzle together at the same time. It's exactly the scenario you described with the rocket ship. So how does that work, and just kind of expand on those early steps to where we are today, and then we can dive into the fun aspects.
Well, the first step was to decide whether we're going to be full vertical. Yes.
Oh, we're
yes,
rubbing it in another interview. Okay.
Because it was a debate, and it was a real debate. So we had to go back and forth, and Carl was like, no, all businesses that are successful are, they focus on one thing.
I took a look at just it was like, no, take a look at the S&P, right? All of these companies are specialized. Apple, Netflix, Google. Fuck no, they're not. Okay. All right. No, they're vertical with walled gardens. Okay.
So for me, as a small company, being full vertical was imperative.
What does that mean? Just in case people aren't familiar with vertical, can you quickly expand on what that means?
It's being able to be, in essence, you could be self-sustaining if you had to be. So you're not really relying on any one company or any one aspect of the industry and the supply chain to operate your company. If you're a standalone retailer, you need to buy product. So you're relying on the people who produce the product to get that product. You can't control the price of that product. So when you're producing the product, the only way, it comes down to cost. So the lower you can get your cost per pound, the better off you're doing. Now you can take that right into retail from there and have a much higher margin than if I'm going to just sell that to a wholesale. So it helps you with what I call levers. It creates as many levers as possible, because, you want to be able to play with those levers and pull them at the right times, sometimes dial down, sometimes go full throttle on some. And without those levers, you're kind of limited to, if you're just a standalone retailer, it's just like you're just standing there with one lever. You can't control that. The only thing you control is the price that you're selling out your product for. And if your product's going out for less, now you have to attract more people to even get the same revenue. So you're kind of beholden to only that one avenue, where the full vertical gives you, the avenue of a manufacturer where we sell a ton of bulk oil. A lot of the largest vape sellers in Massachusetts do not make oil. They produce vape carts. There's a big difference. So there's that aspect to it. Those are levers. And if you're not pulling the levers, then you're not really maximizing your efficiency as an operator in the space. There are a lot of MSOs, these big companies, that they have contracts in several of the states, so that they have a contract in Massachusetts now. We don't have that ability. So I don't want ever to be held over the fire by anyone. And no matter what, if we had to be, we could be self-sufficient. But we want to give variety on our shelves. And so we do carry other products. But typically you walk through our store and you could point to anything on our shelves and say, why are you carrying them? And I have a story for it, and I can tell you who the owners are. And that to me is it's all about relationships and building those. And small operators have really good products, so gives us good diversification for products.
But expanding on that, having all those levers also comes on the other side of the coin, means you have to put in place SOPs, resources, and know-how in order to achieve that. Because on the flip side, if let's say you're doing cultivation and your price goes too high, then you can sell to your retail, your price has to inflate. So now you're playing the other side of the game, which is just another challenge here in cannabis, because exactly like you were saying, Carl, too, is that like you have to raise the fund in order to spin up the vertical, and then you have to build in the efficiency. So that is not an easy task. So take us through that process, because those are my favorite aspects, right? Understanding those early days of working through some of the difficulties. Do you have any stories of like, hey, like we're producing a batch and we blew through the cost and went like this, and then we had to solve it like this? Or was there on the flip side where you had, your first crop did really good or really bad? And then take us through how it went, just to give us a ratio from the balancing.
As far as cultivation goes, we always call like the first few batches like the first pancakes, like they're never as good as you want them to be, but it's like it's a pancake, so it's just like no one's ever usually proud of that one. So dialing it in took us about, I would say about 18 months to really dial in cultivation and get it to where we wanted it to be. The lab really was a faster ramp up, because that's just science and chemistry, and it wasn't, it's not rocket science, as I always say. Producing distillate's fairly simple in a lab. So that was our first, we took in a lot of biomass, and we had a fantastic partner that has an awesome farm out in Western Mass called High Plains Farms. They were our first really partner and collab in Massachusetts, because we needed biomass. We needed a lot of biomass. They needed product, we needed product. So we worked together to extract their product, and then work together to generate revenue from what we extracted from that product. So really starting that relationship, and we still work with those guys today. They're fantastic. It's stuff like that really helped us get going, but it's also, it's tough. Like you said, I mean, you have all these departments, and you need people to run those departments. And the main thing I would say is trust. You got to be able to trust whoever is running that department, because you can't micromanage a full vertical like that. So, having a solid core team to help run the facility, because the facility in itself is a beast. You have an extraction lab with all kinds of moving parts and chillers and stuff, and then you have a grow facility where you have also lots of moving parts and different things in there, CO2 and all these valves, and we have a water treatment room. So we also have a fantastic facilities manager that used to work on cranberry bogs, Dan O'Connor, and he can fix anything. Half the shit that happens in that building I don't even hear about. And it's those are the things that you really need in place, and it's everybody working towards that same goal and moving in the same direction. And we always say, make sure that everybody's rowing in the same direction on the boat, because if not, you kind of you might be going in circles, since everybody's working really hard to go in circles. So that's very important to us, that everybody understands what the goal is at hand and is working towards that goal. And having that core group is vital in that full vertical, because if one department's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, the whole thing falls apart.
So even within this like full vertical, you guys also support tolling and some internal brands, correct? And so talk us through the balancing act of, okay, we have this big toll order, but we just sold out of this brand. Is there some sort of give and take, or is it like hard lines where like, no, this is strictly tolling in the facility, this is strictly for our brands, and we kind of keep it in line in that essence?
I mean, there's been times where we've brought on a big toll process partner, and we needed to get through it in a certain time, but we didn't want to lose our own production. So it's really managing production, time, and managing the personnel too, because you can't just be like, oh, well, we'll just do this then. It's like, no, you have to make sure they're available to do it then. But we've done things where we'll just offer overtime to these guys to do night shifts, and they'll come in and they'll get through it, and they're getting a little extra on top, and we're getting, what we need to get done. But really it comes down to that production management and making sure that we can do what we say we can do. And that's a big thing in cannabis, because everybody wants to do it, but the question is, can you do it? And can you do it in the timeline that they need it to get done by? And that's the big thing is doing. And if you don't, then you got to own it. And that's one thing we always say, like, if you don't deliver, you got to at least own it and try to make it right. A lot of people are just like, oh, well, sorry, that didn't work. And that's just a bad way to do business. We always want a second chance to show you that we can do it right. And that's tolling is a whole different animal, and it comes down to biomass on one side, which is the distillate, and then on the other side it's quality fresh frozen. So you need a team out there on the road and people that know what they're looking at, so that you can get good quality feed for your machines. And you need a lot of it on the distillate side if you want to be able to produce what you need to produce. So it's always a distillate hunt, a feed hunt for the distillate, and looking for quality collab partners on the hydrocarbon side. We always try to call out who grew the flower on the concentrate and on the packaging. It really tells a story, and I think the customers love to hear the story of where did this product come from. And we can't grow every strain, but I like to believe we can extract them.
So managing expectations got to be a big part of that, right? Because every biomass is different. And so the first time you maybe go talk to a farmer that's looking to toll, and they're like, hey, we have this OG, we got it extracted here 2 years ago, this is our yield. Like, how do you guys balance some of those conversations? Because you're like, hey, we've never done this on your guys' material. So like, we don't know what it's going to perform. Is it kind of like an open relationship at first, where you're like, hey, whatever it performs at, this is what it is. Trust us, and this is the number now. Is that kind of how the conversations go, or is it a little more detailed?
Our director of production, our VP of production at Spencer is fantastic at managing that side of things. He's very science oriented, and we have a lot of data to show what we produced, but you can't just go on a COA, because that COA is probably from the flower. So you're not going to get what you think. They're going to be like, oh, I have a 25% trim. It's like, no. So that expectation is, that's just talking them through it, trying to explain to them, like, if you really want, you can get it retested, and we can kind of go that way, but we're trying to help you save money. But, by not having to get it retested, we can kind of gauge based on, if we look at it, we can probably tell you what it's going to yield, at least within a parameter. Or we'll do a trial run. Send us, 100 pounds. We'll do a trial run. If you like it, then we move forward. If you like it and we like it, we move forward. If we don't, we don't. And those happen a lot, where people are like, all right, let's see what you can do. And then once they're happy, it's just, it'll continue. So it's trial runs, and also having Spencer really kind of mitigate and make sure we're not bringing in stuff we shouldn't be bringing in, because we don't want to waste our time, but we don't want to mislead somebody either, and have a bad relationship start over something that could have easily been avoided.
Do you think that the strain is more important in that, or the grower, or is it kind of like a combination of the two?
Distillate doesn't matter.
Okay.
I mean, you're extracting just a molecule.
Yeah.
So on the hydrocarbon side, the strain definitely matters, and the grower matters. They both matter probably just as equal, because the strain is your profile for the terpenes and the cannabinoids. So, the idea over there is you're getting your minors and you're getting your terpene profile. We love doing single source, so you're getting that single source terpene for that concentrate. That's really, I always say, the hydrocarbon side is where the art meets the science, and the other side is just basically just straight science. Not to knock the distillate guys. I mean, they're fantastic at what they do, and 90% of the industry is fueled by distillate. So it's very important for us to have both those sides of the lab, where we can do a high quality craft product on the hydrocarbon side. We've been doing a lot of these HTE, what we call terplicators, and it's basically like a mini paintbrush, and you can paint the HTE on any joint. And a customer came out to me, she's like, I love these things. You can make any joint taste good. And I was like, that's awesome, stealing it.
I love it.
So we do a lot of experimenting a little bit on that side. Massachusetts has a 12 ppm limit, so it's very, very difficult to produce a clean product over there without sacrificing some of the quality. So the guys over there are true artists. They basically have to take extra steps and precautions to make sure that we do hit the ppm levels. And I'm stoked every time I get the test back and it has the ND for non-detected. That to me is, it's like, all right, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and everybody's always afraid of the solvent extracts. I'm like, well, it's basically at this point solventless. There's more hydrocarbon in your cheeseburger than there is in an entire kilo of our concentrate.
Or your cold medicine now, right? We saw that cold medicine.
Terrible.
Yes.
Has a bunch of benzene
a lot
in
of
it.
stuff is extracted with, peanut butter. I think they use hexane.
Yeah, same with potato chips too. They use hexane. Lay's potato chips.
And then they take all the peanut oil out and put vegetable oil in and tell you it's peanut butter.
It's cheaper that way.
So
Yeah.
Carl, I want to ask you, when you were going through the numbers from the vertical integration standpoint, was there a part of the business that you were a little more hesitant to, maybe from a financial standpoint, saying that, okay, we had to invest, let's say $500,000 for extraction, and I'm not sure it's going to produce the return on the investment? Or is it a more macro investment of saying, like, we don't want to get distracted by all these shiny objects at the same time? What was bigger the challenge? And then did any aspects of the business now surprise you?
So when we were working on the original pro forma, we actually excluded the extraction lab from extracting anything other than our trim and failed product or maybe some of the stuff we froze, right? Because the idea was, we have a friend, Nick Laramidis, he owns Cannabis, which is a privately held MSO, Missouri, Chicago, I forget where else, but he introduced through somebody, and so we sent him over our pro forma that we had our former accountants, help build. And when I say help build, and he takes a look, maybe Jesse, took him 30 seconds, and he's like, I don't know what's wrong. Or he's like, it's wrong. And we're like, well, what? No, we did all the numbers. And he's like, it's going to cost twice, it's going to take twice as long and cost twice as much. And Nick was actually wrong. It cost 4 times as much and took 3 times as long. So again, we predicted price compression in flower, right? Like, we predicted it going from, it was, I think, trading at a high of $6,500 a pound when medical first opened. So, I mean, some errant high ticks. You were sort of in the, 14 and a half dollars a gram. And it was actually funny in the industry. I'm starting to take a look at the numbers, right? And so the Cannabis Control Commission has this open data program where you can see all the licenses and all the stuff and the tiers, and you can sort of just figure out. And it's like, yes, cannabis prices in Massachusetts stayed anomalously high compared to the price compression in other states because COVID hit and the federal government said, you are virtuous to stay home and smoke weed, and here's a check for it. So all of a sudden, and then interest rates went de facto negative. So all of these cultivation came on, tier relegation, which is part of the regs, wasn't enforced. So all of a sudden you had this tremendous oversupply. And I'm just sort of taking a look. And when prices, I think, were trading at 12, I went on LinkedIn and I'm like, guys, can you operate in a $5 a gram world? Because that's just how math works. And I was called Calamity Carl. It's my fault. Like people would meet me at conferences, like I made this happen. It's like, what the fuck? I mean, just numbers.
It's just
right.
math.
So, but it was faster than we expected. When we saw oil, our first trade in distillate was, I'm talking like my old life, our first sale in distillate was $28,000 a kilo. It went down to 3. It's bounced to 5.5, 6. But yeah, no, how do you, like, it'll be interesting to see, like, when as continued states go online, if the same mistakes are made, because what I'm seeing is they still are. Like New Jersey, New York, like some of the same shit still happening. So, modeling this out, it's, if you took a look at our investment stuff, I mean, it's every disclaimer, like, yes, Jesse allegedly grew weed in a dog kennel. Cool. How many lights?
Yeah, about 30.
How many do we have now?
254.
Okay, so right, like, so just different. And also even just, one of the things in Mass now, and it is pivoting a little bit, but we're going through some of the same AR stuff that other states are, and all of it. And Jesse will get, as we talk about the transition from legacy to legal, just talk about how, like, in the traditional market, there were, well, here.
I mean, there were codes, and people followed them, and there was etiquette. And this industry is the Wild West. And I always joke, there's no nomenclature police. There's no one going around and be like, you can't call that live resin. But it's interesting to me how some companies just don't mind just doing that avenue where they're putting live resin terpenes into distillate and calling it live resin. I don't know if it's out of ignorance or if it's just out of marketing ploys or what it is. But, I feel like the integrity of the industry needs to be upheld. And that was important, in the traditional market, was the integrity being upheld. And I think that's a big part of the culture clash that we're seeing right now in this industry is it's around integrity. And, you see, so many people going online talking about, how they're turning this job down, they're turning that job down because of who's offering it to them. And, it'd probably be a good high paying job, but, they rather save their soul. When you start hearing those things, it's just like, all right, that's kind of disheartening. but you have to expect that it's going to be out there. And I don't think it's going to get any better when you've got big pharma, tobacco, and big alcohol standing on the sideline waiting to get in. It's going to get worse. And I think that some of these big cannabis companies right now are going to start to feel, I understand what it feels like to be the little guy. That's going to be an interesting one. We hear it all the time. Where's this going to go? And that's the part that no one can project. There's a lot of uncharted waters here, and there's a lot of different avenues that it could go down as far as states' rights, federal legalization, or the state border is going to open. What does that mean? Is it just state, bordering states? Is it, can you ship across state lines now? Like, there's so many different ways it can go that, how do you tell an investor that this is where it's going to go? As a leader trying to get people to invest in this, it's like, you've got to show them what they can't even see themselves. And that's having that vision it's tough in this industry because there's a ton of them, but it's important that it keeps moving forward. And I think that, it is. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of companies in Massachusetts fall off right now, but we think it's going to stabilize, and the companies that can survive the storm are going to be there to kind of capitalize on that and then, recoup and start to rebuild. But it's been a bloodbath over the past year in Mass. I won't lie.
Do you think that like changing strains or kind of expanding your reach, like what kind of is some of the tools in a toolbox that people can use to try to navigate these rough waters?
I think it's really, again, I think it comes down to relationships. It's build relationships and maintain those relationships. And that's so important, really supporting each other and knowing that you can rely on that other company and they can rely on you. And that, they're not just going to cast you aside for the next person for a better deal. And they're going to try to work with you if they have a better deal, and they have a better deal. But that's a conversation that you can have. And some people, that I think that's probably the most important thing. And that would be my one suggestion, is build the relationships and not only build them, maintain them. And that's so important because, somebody's coming right behind you building a relationship too. So it's maintaining those relationships and showing that you have something to give, as well. You can't just be a taker. You got to be able to give people what they need as well for a fair value, so that they can build their company. I mean, we're all trying to work together to make money and provide a good quality product that the customer can afford. But we also have to make money in order to survive with these companies so the customer does not have product, at least quality product.
It's got to be such a complicated balance, right? Of having both of them at the same time, because you're right. Like what others sometimes do in the industry is they maybe take shortcuts. Because of that, the customer might not know what's going on. Then they might misrepresent the product, which then jeopardizes kind of like that person's perspective on the specific product, which then just influences them maybe not to try it again. So do you think the industry should self-regulate, or do you think that regulators should take a different step? Do you think there needs to be advanced integrity of testing? Take us through what you think needs to happen.
Probably a combination. Carl can probably get into a little bit of the testing if he wants. I mean, that's a tough subject right there. But, I think as far as self-regulating goes, it's like we all know as operators in the industry who the bad actors are. And, it was even tough for us early on because we were launching retail and we needed people that would give us terms because we didn't have a lot of cash to outlay. And the smaller craft companies they need money right now, so they can't lay out all their product for terms for 30 days later. So you're forced to carry these big companies, and they maintain shelf space by doing tactics like that, or purchasing shelf space. They'll say, "Well, we're just purchasing marketing space over here," and that's common practice in Mass. So it's really, like I said, maintain those relationships, work with those companies that you want to work with and that you want to support. That's got to be the key here, and regulate it that way where you're supporting the companies you want to support and you're not supporting the companies that are the bad actors. As far as regulating testing goes, for me, I think there's two big testing issues right now. One is around the potency issues, and making sure that everybody's doing it the same and that everybody's following the same guidelines and playing by the same rules. I 100% support that. However, they need to get that done, get it done. Make sure that one COA should be at least similar to another COA if it was tested at that same lab. I understand there's going to be variance. There's going to be variance if you test the same plant in 10 different areas of that plant, but it should be, within reason. And some of these test results that we're seeing, lots of straight lines, I will say on graphs, and that usually is an indicator of what the hell is going on right here. Why did it just drop off, and then everything else is hovering right above it? That's obviously questionable, and we know there's no straight lines in nature, so that's not going to happen. But I think that the CCC can regulate that aspect of it. Is if the labs are giving reports to the CCC saying here's our variance, here's what we're getting for test results, that would clear up a lot of that. And that's kind of how this was discovered by independent people like Jeff Rawson to go out there and do the work. I always say, I'm like, you're doing God's work, because no one's paying him to do this. He's doing it to reveal the truth. And I think that's fantastic. And that's the integrity that we're talking about that needs to be upheld. The other side of testing is around the type of testing that you use for yeast and mold, all of that type of stuff, and also around irradiated cannabis and whether that needs to be labeled or not. That's probably one of the biggest ones for me. I think, holding transparency and integrity, I think that's a must. If you're allowing companies to treat stuff with ozone or with radiation, I think it needs to be explained and told to the consumer, because it is to me as a manufacturer. I see the little symbol on it. I know that it's been treated. At least if it was remediated, it's treated.
Prophylactically,
Yes. But if they do it in line, if you will, and they treat it before they go get it tested, you never know that that's a failed product, even though they know it would have failed beforehand. And that's not the proper use of that equipment. So, or that technology for that matter. So there's a lot of controversy around that. We're big advocates of just tell the customer, you should be putting a symbol on there. There's companies that are, radiation free. They have a symbol that you can, you work with them and you pay them a service because they have to do the auditing, make sure that you're not doing it and all of that. So it's a very fair service, but then now we're going out of our way to put it on there and educate the customer that this is what it is, when I feel like it should be the other way around. And the argument on their side always is, well, it's clean, it's safe. We use it for blood transfusions and food and all this stuff. It's clean and it's safe. It's like, all right. And some of them are like, well, it's even cleaner, I think. And I'm like, well, then just tell them. If you think it's better, then just tell them. Why? What are you hiding from? But it's usually people that it's going to hurt their bottom line. And I get that. There's a business aspect to this. And I'm trying to be, cognizant of that. But at the same time, there's a public health risk here as well. And there's, a transparency issue that's happening here, where everybody in the production line knows right up until it goes into a finished good. And that's not right. Why can I not mix a remediated distillate kilo with a non-remediated distillate kilo? They won't let you do that in metric. It's like, nope, you can't do it. But yet you can pass that on to a customer and not even tell them that it was remediated. That to me is sort of shocking. But, sometimes the regulations are.
It's an uncomfortable part of like where we currently are in the industry. And then it just makes it even more difficult for individuals like yourself who are doing it one way and expect others to do what's best for the customer, because exactly like you said, like the customer should know and transparency should operate, because I would assume if most customers were aware, they'd probably make different decisions.
Yeah, I actually just put a poll out on LinkedIn just to kind of tease it, just like how many people are going to say no. And if you could guess who they are just by the list of people that voted.
I'm sure. I want to ask you about something else I saw. Craft cultivation is necessary for craft extraction, as you cannot fake or CRC your way out of it. What does that mean?
The old saying, fire in, fire out. You need to really start with a good quality product to end up with a good quality product extract. You need the high terpene profile. You need the good cannabinoid profile. And, for a yield, you want a good quality flower. You don't want something that's kind of deteriorated. And as soon as it starts to degrade, you're going to be left with a different product in the end. And that's, properly harvesting the fresh frozen is extremely important. And, some companies get it and some companies don't. And it will come in a cooler with regular ice. And it's like, no, this is not fresh frozen. But it's an interesting concept to a lot of people that the cultivator really dictates what comes out in the end of the extraction, and working with the cultivator. And certain cultivators are really good at this. In Mass United Cultivation, we do a lot of hydrocarbon extract for them, and they actually won first place at NECAN for an extract we did with them. So that was exciting, and they take great care in how they they harvest their fresh frozen. And a lot of people don't realize that a lot of frozen is not fresh. It's frozen because it failed, which means that's not why they harvested it. So it's an educating process too, that not all frozen is fresh. And, just because it's frozen, there's old frozen is what we call it. And that, and then there's basically, you have to have something on that plant. Just because you froze it fresh, if there's nothing on there, there's nothing on there to extract. So yeah, if you're growing properly to harvest fresh frozen, it makes a world of a difference in the end of the extract. And if you don't, and if you're extracting something that's old or degraded, on the hydrocarbon side, you can do things to filter and clean things out, and that's called color remediation, which is the CRC, color remediation column. And you put clays in there, and you run that through it, and you filter out all of the unwanteds, which is typically chlorophyll, your colors, your darkness. But you also lose a lot of good stuff like terpenes, and that gets stuck in the media as well. So a lot of CRC hydrocarbon extracts taste exactly the same, because only the major terpenes are making it through, and all the smaller ones that and other things, because I just say terpenes to generalize it. Obviously, we know there are more compounds in there, but all like the lighter stuff is probably not making it through either. It's getting stuck in that media. So it's funny when I look at certain extractors and I see an array of stuff, and I'm like, wow, it all looks the same color and it smells exactly the same, but they're all different strains. So you lose what that strain is when you filter it that way. And that's what the terpene profile is so important about, is collecting that terpene fraction is extremely important when you go to reconstitute that extract. So it's, a lot of people don't understand that concept of it. And, that's how we flavor all of our vape carts. We capture all of our own terpenes in-house, and we use that to flavor even the distillate carts we'll use with a hydrocarbons extract, because if we have extra terpenes, then we have extra terpenes. And that's a great problem to have. So it's a fantastic way to play around and create different products. And, you can take we call them Franken dabs, just made them one time. Like, let's take the terpenes from one and the cannabinoids from another and see what happens. And we'll call it something else, but we'll tell people what it is. We're jokingly calling like uncharted waters. Like, we don't know what we're doing, but we're going to play around with this stuff and see what happens. And it is fun. And it's similar, like if you blend two strains in a tube in hydrocarbon, you're getting both those terpene profiles kind of combined, those cannabinoid profiles combined. So it's, extractors can do that where, the cultivators can crossbreed. So it's fun to play around on that side as well. If we don't have enough of one strain, we look at it and say, all right, what would go well with this? What terpene profile will go well with this terpene profile? Some of them just do not taste good together. So it's fun learning about all that stuff, because that's not necessarily, it's science, but it's like, art science at the same time.
There's that knowledge is like flash freezing, right? And it's like in this book called One of the Six Inventions That Made the Modern World. And what it is when you freeze biological tissue fast, really quickly, you get smaller ice crystals, right? And those ice crystals don't affect all of the other like molecules in there. So you're able to maintain the flavor way better. And they found this out in food, like in the early 1900s, like pulling fish out of like a lake in.
I saw that. I saw a video on that. It was fascinating.
Literally, it's wild, right? And it's wild that like same thing in cannabis now,
Yeah, it's very true. It's preserving the plant itself, without bursting all those cells open. Once you burst those cells open, you're inviting a bunch of unwanteds, and you're losing what you want. Exactly. So it's very important to the whole process through to get that quality product in the end. And when you do, it's just like, you got to give everybody along the chain there credit. So that's important to us. And it's fun because it also, you hit two marketing streams too, where they're marketing it and we're marketing it. And that's the beauty of a collab. I think we might have been the first collab in Massachusetts to do a hydrocarbon extract.
I love it. So we teased it early on. Take us through the cultivation, going out to get the West Coast genetics. Was it something you tried that you needed to bring back, or was it something that you felt like you just wanted to adjust internally?
I think, I'm trying to learn a lot about, I can't tell the customers what they want. They're going to tell me what they want, and I have to listen to them and get them what they want. And this is something that's been gone, we've been talking about this a while, but we didn't want to just do it and take a shot in the dark. we wanted to do it with somebody we knew that knew what they were doing, that had the connections, underground to get the proper genetics, to get the proper, seeds or whatever we're bringing in. Because, that industry is crazy in itself. And there's a lot of fakes, if you will. There's a lot of stuff out there that isn't exactly what you think it might be. And then you roll it out and we're also trying to preserve that integrity for the breeders. Bringing in strains and calling it something that it's not is just sort of the wrong thing to do. But also bringing in seeds and calling it that strain because you think it is that's tough too, because it's like, well, I was told it was this. Like, how do I know it's not? So it's that's important to us too, making sure we do have that direct line to those breeders, that's where it's coming from. And our new cultivation director has those lines. So bringing him in, and this is at the time that we want to do that at the same time, it just kind of makes sense because it gets him excited too, that he gets to bring in his own strains. But we're not getting rid of all the East Coast strains. It's gonna be a mesh of the types of genetics that we like, and I think that's kind of the way to go about right now.
Well, this is also the third turnover of the garden. I mean, none of the first strains that you brought in from the traditional market we still have.
Right. Because of that, because there was no way for me to know that this is that strain. I had a guy tell me that this was a strain, so it wasn't directly from the breeder. And there was kind of some controversy even with our cultivators, but like, I don't think it's this, and I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do. I think it looks great. But I understood that too. And in preserving that integrity for the breeders, because it's not just the cultivators too. It goes all the way back to the guys that are producing these genetics and, the work that they're putting in and the hard, the blood, sweat and tears around that. And people don't understand what goes into that. You need to fail many times to find one winner. And that's the reality. And those guys are, I would say too, like doing God's work, because they're taking a lot of the guesswork out of it for us as commercial producers to bring it to the consumer, and bringing that quality product to the consumer is the goal. And if they're the ones that are really the specialists on that, why not go to them instead of, like a Monsanto or somebody?
Is that part of the process you were saying about like not telling the customers what they should want from an educational standpoint? Because exactly like you said, like if you turn over a product and then you no longer have that strain, they might come into trade and say, hey, Jesse, I bought this product that was awesome last time. When's the next time you're going to get it? Is that the balance you were referring to?
I think it's also, we want to still give the shout out to the East Coast grow, those breeders, so and there are a lot of those strains. If we got rid of, people would be pissed. So yeah, I got to be careful with, I don't want to swing the pendulum too far back the other way. I'd rather it just be organic and let the customer tell us what to do here. That's kind of the goal. Slowly integrate. And if it does end up just keep moving that way, then so be it. But it's up to the customer. It's not up to us.
Is there a West Coast strain that you're particularly excited about that you guys brought in?
I can't give away any strains.
It's just the four of us. It's just the four of us.
But no, I'm just excited about the opportunity to see what our facility can do with these strains. And I think our facility has produced some unbelievable flower to date. Our gastropop hit over 6.1% terpenes. So it's, I'm excited to see what I always call it the machine, what the machine can do with these strains, because I've seen these strains grow in other facilities and I was blown away. So that's what I'm looking for, but also they have to be commercially viable. And that's kind of one of those things where, that's why the breeders are so important. It's like, they've got to give us a quality product that is also commercially viable. And so we have to be able to run the tests in-house and make sure we're getting the yields we need, making sure we're getting the demand that we need for it from the customers. It's great. It doesn't matter if we like it and we have lots of it, like that does us no good. So it's that balancing act that we're always looking for. And that's why it's important to listen to the customer. And it's not just our customer in the retail store. The wholesale buyers, they dictate a lot. And if they like certain strains and they want to carry certain strains in their stores, then we got to listen to them. And those are the strains that we got to produce. Sativas is still a huge thing here. It's amazing where I still see customers and people and even buyers being like, I need sativa. I'm like, well, I want this sativa leaning. And they're like, no, I need all sativa. And I'm like, it rattles my brain. And I'm like, all right, like we got to get away from those. There's only three choices. I was like, let's create the spectrum and show people where it falls along the spectrum. But it's difficult too, because you have every strain has, so many phenotypes, and it's, that might be 1% of the mother that was indica and 99% of the sativa father, or you might have one that's 50-50, or you might have one completely the other way. So it's not just the strain, and everybody wants to be like, well, this strain is a sativa. I'm like, oh God. I'm like, we're getting so like, I don't know, we have to label everything. It's like, why don't we just show where it falls on a certain spectrum? Because this is what could be possible. Let's show that. And that's kind of our goal now. We're actually changing our retail strategy to do that, because I see customers come in, they're like, you don't have any sativas. You have a bunch of hybrids. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm trying to show them like, yes, most of them are hybrids, but this one's leaning towards the sativa side. Look at the terpene profile. This is what's typically found in a sativa. So it's really it's baby step educating, but that's the goal.
Yeah, look through the window. So we have a window into our dispensary. It's like, look through the window. You see the short, bushier plants, indica. If you like the tall, skinny ones, those are sativa presenting, right? Like, but yeah, it is. Yeah.
But they want the sativas, longer grow, lower yield typically. So it's all a balance in the end, and that's really what it comes down to. You got to find what works, but also and then you want to keep it moving too with the strains. So you don't want to just keep having the same strains. You're like, oh, I had that last time. Oh, I had that 2 times ago. So it's like, oh damn. Like, so you gotta keep everybody happy and keep it going. So for a small facility, that makes it difficult, because you only have so much space to carry those genetics and carry those moms. And so but it opens a challenge we accept, and it is fun to start new lines and see what they can do. Some of them I'm like, why do we do that? We'll never do that again. But it's been extremely fun learning with our cultivators too along the way, working with the sales team and with production, looking at the numbers of the yields, all of that, and saying, all right, this one, sitting down as a group and figuring that out is the best way to do it. If you rely on the cultivators, you're going to be growing what they love, not what the customer loves. So if you listen to the guys in the spreadsheets, you're going to be missing out on a whole segment of the market, because you're probably not going to be growing sativas. So it's you got to listen to everybody and balance that all out across the board, and then make your decisions. And sometimes there's really no good decisions. It's just you gotta live with it. And I always say I don't get to do any part of the business that I actually like anymore. I don't. People like you used to cultivate. You're a cultivator. I'm like, I don't cultivate. They're like, you're an extractor. I'm like, I haven't touched an extraction equipment in a while, except for like to help fix it. It's like I don't do any of the stuff. I manage is what I do. Put out fires wherever they might be.
I'm sure those are constant and endless. So last question I have for each of you. What is one aspect or takeaway for a listener who wants to try a product? What should they know that's unique about TradeViews that they should look for when they want to go into your store?
So if there are, I think, 120 some odd cultivators in the state, and I'm just going to go sort of by the numbers here. There are 19. So we hit 28% higher in so across, and we don't tack and THC select for flower, right? Like we have some more old school strains that just present lower, right? Like that's just how it is. But we're 28% higher in THCA, and compared to state average through MCR Labs publishes that stuff. But more excitingly, 57% higher in terpenes. And we got that gastropop result back like maybe a month and a half ago. And it came back at 5.89%. And it was like, no, that's obviously wrong. Retested, and it came back at 6.1. It's like, okay, so, if you like flavors, come to TradeViews. I will also confidently say, while we're maybe top 20 cultivators and could do it at somewhat scale, I think for live resin, I'd put us at 2, 3. And we're sharking our way up. So again, if you like flavors, we don't CRC, so not everything just tastes like lemons, right? And our retail store we're the only, actually, that's a funny story. So I learned a few things in my 40s. Maybe this will surprise you. So I learned at 42, I think, that ponies don't grow up to be horses. I learned at 44 that the space heater wasn't NASA technology, that it was just something used to heat a space. And I learned when on the phone with Kyle over at NEA, and I was saying because we opened up cultivation manufacturing first and then retail. And so I'm telling him, we're going to have the first grow east of the Mississippi that you could see into a dispensary that you could see into a grow. And he responded, actually, I built one in Michigan. And that's when I realized I had no idea that Michigan was east or west of the Mississippi. So these are key selling points, Mr. Pitts.
I think really our concentrates is really where we stand out. Our flower is fantastic. There are a lot of good cultivators in the state. Our flower definitely is up there, especially for the price points that we have them at. But I think that our concentrates is really where we separate ourselves in the industry. And, the HDE products, I think, are the ones that, we're really starting to develop now. We started to put out a couple of HDE pens that were absolutely fantastic. And, that it's those types of products that I think are, some of them only are available in our store because they're very small batch. And it's those ones that's what excites me. And when one of those hits the floor, it's like, oh, I'll have one of those for my arsenal, as I call it. But yeah, I think that it's going to be the HDE products that we're going to start to look at developing. And our live resin, really, our dabbable concentrates are phenomenal.
I love it. So for our listeners, they want to get in touch, they want to try some of your products. Where can they find you guys?
So traderoots.buzz, B-U-Z-Z. Instagram, traderoots_buzz. LinkedIn, we're all over the place. And I'm Carl at traderoots.buzz. He's Jesse at traderoots.buzz. Reach out.
Awesome. We'll link it on all the show notes. Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
Appreciate
Thanks,
you guys
guys.
having us, man.